Fanfic Corner, presented by Jennifer. Hyperspace Thoughts. The Bad Batch were on their way back to Ord Mantell after a long and exhausting mission. The ship was quiet for the most part, minus the quiet snoring of the Bad Batch members. They were traveling through hyperspace, and they had a while to go still until they reached their destination. Hunter tossed and turned in his bed, trying to fall asleep. He was so tired, but there was something he just couldn't seem to get out of his head. Giving up on trying to sleep, Hunter threw the sheets off his body. He moved so that he was sitting on the side of his bed. He looked at the ground with his head hanging. What was he doing? Hunter ran his hands through his hair. He took a deep breath and pushed himself off his bed and walked to the cockpit. He sat down in the pilot's chair on the right side of the cockpit, crossed his arms, and rested them on the control panel. He looked out into the stars as they passed by at hyperspeed. Every single one of the stars he saw passing by seemed to be one of his ever-growing thoughts. How did it get this far? Hunter thought. He took another deep breath. First, Crosshair's chip gets activated, and we had no choice but to leave him behind. I need to protect my squad and Omega. I needed to protect my squad and Omega. Omega. Hunter's mind drifted back to the girl. I know I couldn't just let her stay and suffer back on Camino, but I have no idea how to raise a child. None of us do. Now we're constantly on the run and working for Sid. Working for Sid is so complicated. This is not what my brothers are trained for. I have no intentions on living the rest of our lives like this. My brothers and I were raised for war, not smuggling. Where would we be right now without it? Nowhere is safe with the Empire around. Hunter thought back to Crosshair again. Crosshair joined the Empire. Hunter's face contorted into a frown. We have to get him back, but every time we come face to face, I end up running away. I'm not scared of him, but I'm scared of what he could do. How could we even get his chip out and restrain him? But we can't right now. We have to keep the kids safe. How am I supposed to save Crosshair when I can barely save Omega from a bounty hunter? His mind shifted back once more to Omega. Hunter stared deeper into the stars as if that was even possible. How could I save her from me if my chip activated? She wouldn't expect it. What if I kill her in cold blood? What if I don't want to do it, but I can't control it and pull the trigger? I would watch her face as she cowers in terror and pleads for her life. I would slowly be ripped apart inside, piece by piece, and have to live with it for the rest of my life, constantly suffering. Hunter shoved his face into his hands and ran them through his hair once more. He went back to looking out into hyperspace. This was no life for a child. For her to live every day with the risk of our chips being activated, bouncing around from planet to planet, and bounty hunters tracking her every move. Hunter was so far plagued into his thoughts that he didn't hear the footsteps coming from the back of the ship getting closer to him. His thoughts were like waves crashing onto the side of the AC wall, one after another, never ending. Hunter was startled when all of a sudden he felt a gentle tap on his thigh. He looked down to his side to see that Omega was standing there. She had Wrecker's Lula in her hand that he had given her. Omega looked at him with her piercing brown eyes. Can't sleep either, huh? Hunter is intrigued by Omega's presence. Omega shook her head no. Come here. Hunter turned in the chair and leaned over to pick her up. He placed her in his lap with her back against his chest. Hunter placed one of his arms on the armrest and the other wrapped around Omega's stomach, holding her. She looked out into hyperspace, watching the stars fly by. Something in Hunter's emotions shift when Omega showed up. Every time he sees her, he always seems to feel a different way. No matter what mood he's in, he always finds himself smiling or feeling something warm inside that he just couldn't describe. Omega placed her hand on top of Hunter's hand. I didn't mean to scare you. Hunter flipped his hand over and gently held Omega's hand in his. It's okay, Omega. I didn't hear you coming, that's all, Hunter said softly. Omega shifted her body to where she was in between the armrest and the side of Hunter. He still was holding her hand and had his arm around her stomach. She looked up at him with her big doe eyes. Why can't you sleep, Hunter? She could see that he was tired, but he couldn't just go to sleep like her. I was thinking too much. He looked down at her, trying not to reveal too much. About what? Omega was curious, to say the least. Hunter wasn't expecting her to ask him what he was thinking about, but Omega's compelling eyes drew the truth out of him. You. He looked down at her with a smile that she returned. And? Omega was wondering what was going on in her brother's head. And Hunter was still looking down at Omega. I think you should be getting some rest. Hunter reached down beside him and picked up a blanket that was slumped in a pile on the ground. He took both ends of the blanket in his hands. He threw it over the two of them. Omega lifted up her arms, holding Lula, as Hunter tucked the blanket under her arms. Hunter wrapped his arm that was closest to Omega around her stomach, holding her close to his side once more. Omega rested her head on his chest, looking out at hyperspace. Good night, Hunter, Omega said, finally closing her eyes. Good night, Omega. Hunter moved his free hand to where it was under the blanket. He looked back out into hyperspace. There is nothing I wouldn't do to protect Omega, but I do not think we are prepared for all the challenges it might throw at us. But she is our sister, and I will do anything.